We've seen what the NYPD does when they have a mayor who doesn't have their back. You know what they do? They turn their backs.
Welcome to New York One's Off Topic on Politics. I'm New York One political reporter Bobby Cuza. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo was back in his comfort zone on Monday, sitting at a table addressing the cameras, a PowerPoint presentation on a projection screen behind him. But this was not a 2020 COVID briefing. It was Cuomo, candidate for mayor, talking about his plan to beef up the NYPD and taking shots at Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani, meanwhile, was talking free universal childcare this week, joined by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who called him the future of the Democratic Party. We will get you all caught up on the race for mayor, including a report in the New York Times on Wednesday that President Donald Trump is considering getting involved in the race. Then we will talk about Governor Kathy Hochul. This week, she hosted a group of Texas Democratic state lawmakers who quite literally fled the state in order to try to block or at least delay a Republican plan to redraw Texas's congressional districts. And Hochul says she's prepared to fight fire with fire. We will explain what the heck that means with our own Bernadette Hogan. Hey, Bernadette.
Hey there, Bobby. Good to see you.
Ayana Harry joins us as well. Hey, Ayana.
Hi, we're matching today for people who are watching us on YouTube.
Don't bring it up. I'm not matching.
All right, Ayana, you are going to really carry us through this first segment because you were at Governor Cuomo's briefing on Monday. Let's start there because when I saw the backdrop of Cuomo's event, I had flashbacks to March of 2020 and the COVID briefings. I mean, this had to have been intentional, right? The way that he styled this.
Yeah, and he seemed completely comfortable. So when we got the notice that Andrew Cuomo would be holding this press briefing at the Sheraton Hotel, like I didn't quite understand how or why it would be there, but there wasn't much notice, so we had to just get there. And as soon as you walked into the room, it immediately reminded me and other reporters of the press conferences that Andrew Cuomo held day in and day out during the early days of the pandemic. And when I'm out on the campaign trail with Andrew Cuomo, that is how many voters remember him. That's where they connected with him on a deeper level. That's how people feel connected to him. And so he brought it back and he looked very, very comfortable. He was kind of in a position of power. He's like sitting above, you know, where the reporters are below. He has the slideshow where he's taking his time. He's going through it. And then at the end, you know, he fielded a lot of the questions and was even calling on some of the reporters by name, in addition to, you know, his press team calling on people as well. So this was Andrew Cuomo in control, looking very comfortable. And even when his team said, okay, that's it, no more questions, he still took more questions and really engaged in people and seemed happy to take questions, as opposed to in the past when he seemed more annoyed to kind of engage. But overall, he was talking about this $250 million plan to restore and rebuild the NYPD. So Andrew Cuomo has said for months he wants to add 5,000 new officers. Now he gave more details on how he would do it, and he thinks the key is to raise the starting pay for NYPD officers with bonuses and to provide other financial incentives for officers as they stay on the force longer and longer, also educational benefits like CUNY and SUNY scholarships. So, and he also talked about these community police officer meetings that he wants to have within local precincts on a regular basis to just sort of bridge the gap. And he did acknowledge, yes, New Yorkers do have distrust when it comes to the NYPD. I mean, look at the scandals we've seen in recent months, lawsuit after lawsuit, commissioner after commissioner. And so Cuomo asserted these police community meetings would help break down some of that tension. So that's what Andrew Cuomo put forward.
And he delved into the policy, right? The police, you know, beefing up the police force, adding to the headcount. But he also took a lot of shots at Mamdani, right?
Over and over again. And notably, no shots at Eric Adams. So he really is focusing his ire right now as Zohran Mamdani.
And he even put Mamdani tweets up
Yes.
on as part of the PowerPoint presentation, right?
Yeah.
Which is what he did during the primary. Towards the end of the primary, I covered an event on a weekend in the Bronx where he brought up the mother of a guy that had been slain by gun violence, but he basically used it as a reason to put those tweets up that Mamdani had put out in the past saying the NYPD is racist, or saying that the NYPD should be cut, right? The defund.
Yeah.
But
was that the mother of Junior?
yes.
So
yes.
the slashing.
Yes.
In the bodega, yes.
But basically, it's almost like Cuomo's idea of how he wished he could have run the primary is now coming true because he can run on a record or, you know, his ideas on public safety and really slam Mamdani on his past statements, which of course, Mamdani, and you were at the Assemblyman's event earlier that day, has continued to have to defend himself, but now it's really come to the forefront with the death of Officer Diderel Islam. But it's funny now seeing Cuomo like totally leaning into public safety when that really wasn't an issue leading up to the primary.
So I think it was. I do think he spoke a lot about public safety, and he continued to have this message of, you know, New York City is dangerous, everybody is
Right.
afraid. And so I'm actually interested that like he's continuing to lean into the public safety when clearly, based on how well Zohran Mamdani did, New Yorkers care about affordability. So to me, I felt like this was more detail and more policy on what he briefly brushed over during the primary. But like, is this the prime concern of New Yorkers right now? Yes, we did have this like very high profile mass shooting. Yes, we're mourning the loss of a police officer and other New Yorkers. But like day to day, I don't know if crime and policing in the future of the NYPD, like why is this your first big policy speech?
Right. And especially as, you know, I mean, the NYPD has been releasing figures over the past couple of, I mean, I guess the past year, the past couple of months, that all in the 7 major categories, crime has been down. The Post just did a big piece, I think it was on their Wood today, saying that, you know, gun violence has been down and other categories. But none of that really was able to, you know, Mamdani could defend himself, I guess, more. When I was covering him before the primary, before he won, you know, Mamdani, it didn't really stick, I guess, as much. And now I guess Mamdani has to respond to these criticisms more in a more developed way. And Cuomo, you know, is able to thrive in this. He can talk about his ideas. He can talk about his time as governor.
Yeah.
But you know, it is a different deal when you're the mayor and you're dealing with the police force, because he's never had to be the head of the NYPD.
Right.
He was very critical of de Blasio. He's very critical of everything de Blasio did, but he's never actually had to run the police department.
But again, like I don't know if this is like the top issue for voters.
Sure,
so like you guys are
exactly,
arguing back and forth
exactly.
about this issue. Like does the average New Yorker
Right.
care about the SRG and like how, or are they caring about some other issue that like directly impacts them on a day-to-day basis?
Exactly.
So it's like we've got this fight going on and like, okay, that's fine, but does this feel insensitive directly in the wake of an NYPD officer being, you know, just being killed? Like, is now the time to kind of chill out on the politics and let's just show some respect? And then 2, again, I don't know if this is the issue that's going to drive New Yorkers to vote.
I mean, the Cuomo he wasn't chilling out on the issue even the day after the shooting, right? The mass shooting was on a Monday, and already on Tuesday he was doing interviews attacking Mamdani for his stance on policing.
And Mayor Adams had a veiled attack on Mamdani at the funeral when he talked about the SRG, which was kind of like, okay, there's grieving people here, but yes, sure, let's talk about your unit. Okay.
But you said that Cuomo didn't attack Adams, but I did notice at one point during that event on Monday, Cuomo talked about how crime is actually up, right?
Did.
Because we keep hearing
yes.
Mayor Adams out there constantly talking about crime being down. And it's true that shootings are down, there are record lows, murders are down, homicides are down. But then Cuomo gets up and says, actually, crime is up. People feel unsafe, and that's because they are unsafe. So he's clearly trying to he's trying to create a different narrative.
Yes, and we know when it comes to NYPD statistics, like crime is up. It depends on which categories of crime you're
cut
looking
it
at.
any which way.
When you're comparing, this period, these 3 months this year compared to last year, or what about pre-pandemic or historic? Like there's so many different ways. So kind of when I hear an elected official say crime is up or down, like it kind of goes in one ear and out the other for me because I need all of the information and context.
Right, exactly. I mean, I was just at a briefing, a month ago, where they were, I think it was Jessica Tisch, the NYPD commissioner, who was touting Adams's job and saying, she really was standing firm and saying, this is why we have someone like Mayor Adams, who's at the head, he's at the helm. But at the same time, all I could think of was, well, what about pre-pandemic? And what about also the nitty gritty numbers, like subway assaults, right? Those numbers aren't in the majors. But I think when you're talking about Cuomo and Mamdani, Cuomo does want to talk about this.
Yes.
No matter how you slice it, no matter how New Yorkers are thinking, he wants to talk about this because he thinks that he has the upper hand and it will help him over Mamdani. Mamdani, this weekend he was speaking at a church, and I noticed his message really was affordability. Let me get back to the basics. Let me bring people back to why they supported me and just kind of reintroduce myself instead of maybe going back and forth with Cuomo, going back and forth with Adams, who, Adams also has his own critiques of Mamdani, maybe not fully about the public safety stuff, but also about his tenure as a state lawmaker.
And then Mamdani had an event on Monday, which Ayana was also at.
Yeah, busy week.
Where he was with Elizabeth Warren, right? Who is another sort of hero of the left, and he was talking. I don't really get what the context of the event was. It was
a roundtable conversation at DC 37 with local parents talking about childcare and the lack of affordable childcare throughout New York City. And so it was meant to be an opportunity for Mamdani and Elizabeth Warren to hear directly from families what the struggles specifically have been, what might help. And Mamdani said, well, I have a potential solution, and that's why I'm running for mayor, which is universal child care from, I think it was 6 weeks to 5 years old. And Senator Warren said to the group and to the reporters there as well, yes, this is going to be expensive. No, this will not be easy. And her idea was tax billionaires, and we can do this. And, when you have affordable child care, that means, parents can go to work and participate in the economy and be productive. And this is good for the city. And so that was what the event was really about. But then when the questions came, of course, it was all steered again towards public safety because that's been the topic of the day.
One thing that I took away from that, too, is, you don't have your moderate titans in the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, even Governor Kathy Hochul, but, the national Democrats coming out and endorsing Mamdani yet. But you do have Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you have Bernie Sanders, you have Elizabeth Warren, and, there's kind of that comparison of, we're the older class, we've been around. So are they kind of trying to lend something to Mamdani that, an AOC didn't have when she first came around? So it's almost mutually beneficial too, because, they might not get primaried by somebody that wants to kick. If they didn't support Mamdani, could they have been at risk of a primary the same way that there's been threats against Hakeem Jeffries or anybody else that has refused to endorse him? It is mutually beneficial because it also shows, hey, I was once in your shoes. We might have come from the same, the same thought process. We still agree on this. Let's help each other. That semblance of unity, I guess. So it's it helps both of them too.
It also makes the absence of an endorsement from someone like Hakeem Jeffries or Governor Kathy Hochul stand out even more, that you have Senator Warren coming all the way from Massachusetts to stand and sit with this person. But some of the local elected Congress members and the governor in the state aren't even sitting with him. And I think it does raise these questions of how will this all play out for some of these more moderate Democrats? Will this be the right decision for them? Or will it seem like the Democratic Party is it's off on a train, moving in a new direction, and you guys didn't get on the train as it was taken out of the station?
All right, so here we are in early August. We still have a crowded field in the general election. Nobody seems to be interested in getting out of the race, right? There's all this talk about whether the anti-Mamdani candidates should coalesce around one of them. And now we have this possibility. There's a New York Times report that popped on Wednesday afternoon saying that President Trump is considering somehow getting involved in the race, and that he reportedly had some kind of conversation with Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't even know what to make of this. If Trump gets involved, like, does that help the candidate that he's backing? Does it hurt the candidate that he's backing? Like, I don't even know what form that could take. But it seems like he's interested in the race, and it doesn't seem like he's really on the Eric Adams train. I mean, there was all the speculation for so long that he might try to help Eric Adams. He might even try to help Eric Adams get on the Republican line in the general election in November. That doesn't seem to be happening. So what do we take away from this Trump story?
Well, first of all, the Times reported that Cuomo and Donald Trump shared a phone call, and Trump's interest in the mayoral race, right? It didn't say that he was lending support.
Right.
But Cuomo's supporters, former pollster,
Mark
Penn, they've been writing op-eds saying Andrew Cuomo is still the guy, even though he lost by double digits in the Democratic mayoral primary, and he's our best bet. So, and also I've been hearing, and I'm sure you have too, that Cuomo has been making these calls to supporters or past supporters saying, no, listen, I still have a shot. I still have a shot.
Correct.
But what's interesting about this is also just the back history between Cuomo and Trump.
Yes.
I mean, think about 2020 when the two men had a decent relationship at the beginning, and then it totally frayed.
Yeah.
We sent the president sent the comfort ship to New York, and then you couldn't put anybody on it, and then Cuomo was furious, and then it just kind of spiraled from there. But then before the primary, Trump was asked, going on Air Force One.
Yes, that was interesting.
And Trump didn't even appear to know that Cuomo was running for mayor. So I almost wonder too, because I've talked to Republicans on the national level and in New York who say, well, actually, if Mamdani was elected mayor, it would be a great foil for us when we're trying to run for midterms, for the governor's race to challenge Kathy Hochul, because it would make us look good, and we can, put his face in an ad and talk about how crazy the Democratic Socialist mayor of New York is.
Yeah, a few things. I think one, as you mentioned, Bernadette, and pointed out, we don't know the full context of the phone call between Andrew Cuomo and President Trump. But we all know that President Donald Trump is not very popular in New York City. And yes, Trump did do a bit better in November this time around than he did in previous elections. But now New Yorkers have seen what his policies actually look like. And so we, on our newscasts on a very regular basis, are showing video of people being detained when they show up for their scheduled appointments. Public benefits are being cut. Social safety net organizations are losing their federal funding. And so none of this is really popular. So I don't even understand how President Trump could step into this race in a way that really helps a candidate, other than perhaps a Curtis Sliwa, who is a Republican. But, I asked Curtis Sliwa about this a couple weeks ago. I said, are you looking for President Trump's endorsement? Would you accept it? And he said, I'm not looking for his endorsement. I'm not afraid to disagree with President Trump when we disagree. And Sliwa's take was that maybe Donald Trump should kind of just stay out of it. So I just don't even understand how President Trump could help unless he's giving some resources from behind the scenes that the public doesn't know about. But part of the reason why people don't like Eric Adams is because he aligned himself with President Trump.
Right.
And look at where he's at.
And the resource question too is, Republicans already have to spend so much money on trying to maintain control of Congress. So why would it make any sense to spend money in New York from New York mayoral race where, again, Democrats outweigh Republican registration by 6-1. But that being said, also with Curtis Sliwa, what did he get last time? 26%?
Yeah, I think it's 28.
Yeah.
A really big chunk, which could make a difference in such a split general election. And I was out with him a couple of weeks ago too, and people were coming up to him, stopping their cars, taxi cab drivers who are immigrants, stopping their cars and talking to him for a while. They all knew who he was. That's not to say necessarily that he's a shoo-in, but it's always just interesting to observe how people interact on the ground with these candidates.
My favorite part of the New York Times story on Wednesday, they spoke to Rich Azzopardi, who is the main spokesman for former Governor Cuomo. He said that Mr. Cuomo and Mr. Trump, quote, have not spoken in a while, end quote, but did not clarify what a while meant.
Exactly.
So we don't know
It's always like a verbiage.
In a while, is it like last week or last month or last year?
Been a long time since I rock and roll. I'm like, are we kidding?
We'll see if we get to the bottom of this mystery.
And,
All right.
and I will say we did reach out to the Cuomo campaign as well to get more clarification on the context of this phone call and the timing. I'm checking my cell phone. No texts and no phone calls back.
As soon as we finish taping the podcast, we'll get all the answers, I'm sure. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we will talk about Governor Hochul messing with Texas. Did I already say that? I like that line.
Or don't mess with
We'll talk more about what's happening in Austin and why that could mean more redistricting here in New York.
We're in charge, and we're sick and tired of being pushed around.
All right, so I remember in 2023 doing a podcast, and Bernadette, I'm pretty sure you were there, and we talked about the fact we wouldn't have to talk about redistricting again
For 10 years.
for 10 more years.
Surprise!
And now we're talking about redistricting again. And I mean, we have to give a little bit of the backstory here. So Texas, and you've been reporting on this for weeks, the fact that New York might actually reopen the redistricting process, redraw the congressional maps in response to what's happening in Texas. But then this week, it suddenly became very real. I mean, Governor Hochul had this, I almost said Governor Cuomo. Governor Hochul had this event on Monday where these Texas state Democrats had actually shown up here because they left Texas. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details here, but basically Texas Republicans are going to redraw the congressional lines there in order to flip something like 5 seats, right? They're going to try to draw 5 Democrats out of existence. And so, and this is not typically done, right? Redistricting usually happens every 10 years after the census. So they're doing it mid-cycle. And now Governor Hochul and some other Democratic governors are saying, well, if they're going to do it in Texas, you know, we're going to fight fire with fire, and we're going to do the same thing in some of these Democratic states, including New York. Meanwhile, these Texas state Democrats, in order to deny quorum, left the state. They're on the run. They're on the lam. So we're harboring fugitives here in New York State. And Governor Hochul had them to the mansion on Monday, right? I know you were keeping up with this, Bern.
They, some of these Texas Democrats were able to go to Albany, New York, while others went to Chicago. I mean, I don't know if they got a choice as to where they were going to go, but so some of these lawmakers were at the state capitol with Governor Kathy Hochul, and she sat in the middle of them and, kind of was trying to be the face of this fight against the Republican administration in Washington and what's going on in the Texas state legislature with the redrawing of maps. And we're not used to this in New York because we have something that was enacted in 2014, partially, by former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republicans, and it created this independent redistricting commission that was, even though it says independent at the front, was truly anything but, because it ended up in 2022 a complete deadlock when maps were drawn. They were thrown out because Democrats were accused of gergerrymandering.
Right. Well, basically, there's the independent, the so-called independent commission. Yeah, we're already getting
I'm kind of getting off. But maybe we back up and we go back to what happened on Monday. But so Hochul's surrounded by these Texas Democrats saying, listen, I support you. And actually, New York is going to try to jumpstart its redistricting process early before the 2032 deadline, which is right now where everybody was looking ahead towards, considering our maps were only just certified in 2023. So what the state is limited in what they can do because of the state constitution. So what Governor Hochul and the legislature will have to decide is, number one, do they want to do something that subverts the Constitution, or do they want to propose have the legislature pass something with 2 consecutive legislatures? So that means you have to pass it 2 years in a row. Then you can put it on the ballot for New Yorkers to vote on and decide, do we want to loosen the restrictions on how to deal with redistricting? The earliest that can happen is probably not until, or at least to take effect, 2028, but it can probably go on the ballot for New Yorkers to consider in 2026.
Right, so basically it's against the state constitution to go in and redraw the line. So they're going to try to change the constitution again, but that takes 3 years. So there's no way that New York can do anything by next year.
You're essentially accusing Texas of doing.
Yes.
So we're just you did it, so now we're going to do it too.
That's what they said. That's exactly what they said on Monday. I mean, even Carl Hastie, the state assembly speaker, he said, they we want to fight fair, but I forget exactly what he said, but something like they're fighting dirty,
right?
And so we can't be expected to fight fair.
And
by the way, Governor Hochul came ready with like all the one-liners. She was saying, fight fire with fire, all's fair in love and war. She said, bring it on.
But then they wouldn't answer
Republicans.
questions about how they would do it, and then also wouldn't, the Texas Democrats wouldn't say where they were going after, partially because they are possibly going to get either, in legal trouble or get fined.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story. But with Hochul, again, part of this, it is posturing right now because you cannot do this. And to even discuss it, if you talk to redistricting experts, they say this is kind of lunacy. And when Hochul and Hastie were asked about this, I can't remember the question, but it was something to the effect of, you're saying what they're doing is not fair, like you said, but exactly what you're proposing is to break the rules. Like, are you asking to, have the legal power to gerrymander lines, which is what the 2022 maps were thrown out for.
Right.
And they say, and, Hochul was asked about, it's Wednesday, Hochul talked about it earlier today, and she said, a divided government is good, but right now people are struggling with what's coming out of Washington. So she's using the Trump administration's big, beautiful bill, the support. She thinks that, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to social service programs, even not a full repeal of SALT are reasons why Republicans should be redistricted out of office.
Right. But
which again is a partisan reason too.
Right. Even if the Democrats, and even if Hochul and the Democrats could do this and they passed the bills and they got the constitutional amendment on the ballot in 2027, best case scenario for them, they can change the lines in time for 2028 election. So they're not going to be able to do anything in the short term to try to, flip seats to try to counter what the Republicans in Texas are doing. It seems like a lot of this is posturing, like you said, but that seems to be what Hochul's MO has been lately. She's really been...
She's running for re-election.
Yeah, but she's really sort of pugnacious and, talking tough, trying to, saying she's taking on both against Trump and against congressional Republicans, New York congressional Republicans.
She's raising her national profile for sure, and wading into national fights and national conversations that she doesn't necessarily need to. But I think she feels that this is how she, appears as an aggressive fighter for New Yorkers ahead of 2026.
Yeah.
Right. And she has said in the past, listen, I've been dismissed as an underdog. And, she was, the way she became governor was because Andrew Cuomo resigned in disgrace. And the point truly of the lieutenant governor position in New York is to step into the governorship in case anything happens or in case, the governor goes out of state and then you're the de facto governor. But Hochul, to her credit, has really gotten better at her job ever since she assumed office. She was mocked for just being the person that went around doing ribbon cuttings. But, she really, I've got to say, you talk to people, she remembered everybody's name. She became a massively aggressive fundraiser, so much to the point where Attorney General Letitia James was scared out of running against her for governor.
Which she remembered people's names?
Think about it. If you're the governor and I meet you once or twice, do you think Andrew Cuomo or any other governor in the past would? But truly, I would talk to election commissioners in an upstate town. They'd be like, oh, she remembers me when she comes back, because her job was literally to go across the state and kind of be a cheerleader.
Yeah.
But now, she's been pressured by the Democratic legislature who, threw in her face her Chief Justice appointment, even though she provided them a pay raise. She's done all these things in the effort to be nice and to work with Democrats, and has kind of learned the hard way that just because you're a part of the same party doesn't mean it's going to work. And it almost is, it's as if she likes this position that she's in with Donald Trump, where she's able to keep congestion pricing where it's at for now. She was able to bring back a controversial wind energy program, which the Trump administration is not for. And she can go talk to him and present her plan. And although they're at odds, come away unscathed.
Yeah.
And so it's almost as if she's feeling that she's empowered to be maybe her magic works and she can extend that magic for the rest of the Democratic Party and be the great unifier and then go into 2026 and win and be heralded. And that's her
and by the way, in
legacy.
2026, it's looking more and more like she's probably going to face Elise Stefanik, who is the upstate Republican congresswoman who is very much a MAGA Republican, right? So she can kind of set up. I feel like she's setting up Stefanik as a foil in a way that she might not have been able to do with other Republican opponents, right? So it seems like we're sort of seeing the battle lines getting drawn, and I think you're right. I think Hochul is feeling maybe more confident than she was before, and it's kind of coming through when you watch these press conferences.
Yeah, you're the governor of the state of New York. You have a lot of power. You have Wall Street. You have like vicious powers in the state budget. And if you know how to use them, you can really use that. And of course, everyone wants to come to New York. But going back to Stefanik, if Hochul had faced, a Mike Lawler, for example, the Hudson Valley congressman, Republican, Trump told Lawler, listen, you have to stay in place because you're probably one of the only people that can either retain that seat and fend off a Democratic challenge. Lawler was not happy with that. And he fought for SALT and to get the cap lifted, which is huge for his district because, you have wealthier earners moving up there now, especially in the wake of the pandemic. But now the Elise Stefanik Hochul dynamic will be interesting. 2 upstate women, 2 that are they're very familiar with the Albany area, but again, with Stefanik, a lot of national money and a lot of national support, a lot of in-district support, but how does that play downstate? Hochul makes it a point of saying, hey, I'm down here all the time. She has an apartment. She's really trying to work the 5 boroughs. I don't know how successful a Republican will be if they don't spend that much time here.
And Trump is going to be backing Stefanik in a way that he is not backing any of the candidates for mayor.
Right. Yes, we'll see. According to his New York Times article.
All right, guys, we're going to leave it there. That is going to do it for this week's episode. You can find all of us weeknights at 7 on Inside City Hall on New York One, or you can send us an email at yourstoryny1@charter.com. And you can subscribe to Off Topic wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a review. Special thanks to our producer, Anthony Roman, sitting in the corner. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.